stage, please. I'm Daniel Pelfrey, editorial director at Digital Entertainment News. I've been gaming. My first system was a Pong system, so you do the math. We have a really interesting and diverse panel here with a bunch of different segments of the industry represented. We have Rick LAMBRIGHT from Motiga, Shelby WILLS from Pipeworks, Ben AHRONI from PopCap, Stuart Mulder, no, we don't have Stuart Mulder here, sorry, Michael CUBBAGE from Qualcomm, and Dan MacDONALD from Euphoria. That's correct. We will be looking at the connected home, what it is, what are some of the problems and solutions. But if we could please start off here and give yourselves a brief introduction and what you bring to the conversation and the panel. A couple of sentences about your bio. Start with Rick. No, you're not on.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, that sounds better. My name is Rick LAMBRIGHT. I'm CTO of Motiga, a company here in Bellevue. My background is multiplayer online gaming. I've been doing it since, 17 years now in the game industry. I mostly pride myself on MMO backend server architecture, so I sort of represent the server side of the panel on this, in this particular panel. Games I've worked on you may have heard of are like Total Annihilation and The Matrix Online. More recently, I was chief architect at Gazillion before co-founding Motiga.
Hi, my name is Ben AHRONI, and I'm a producer at PopCap. So I project manage and design games, and I've worked on Bejeweled and Plants vs. Zombies and Peggle and Zuma across a couple platforms like Xbox, iPhone, iPad, Steam, and DS.
I'm Shelby WILLS. I'm a senior producer at Pipeworks Software. We're in Eugene, Oregon, and we're part of Foundation 9, which is a large company collection of about 6 studios. Traditionally, we've done a lot of console development over the last 12 to 14 years, but you know, the market's changing, and we're really focusing on live and trans-platform connected gameplay. So I'm coming at this also from the interconnected console to mobile, how those play patterns interact, as well as when designing a social game, what are the things we've learned. Recently, we launched Dancing with the Stars online, and there are a lot of things, you know, deconstructing how games cover and deal with the lag issues that I think are really interesting and would be great to discuss.
All right, my name is Michael CUBBAGE. I'm from Qualcomm. So I work in the connected home part of Qualcomm. So we're actually defining the next generation of hardware to better deal with the different types of devices and traffic coming into your home at any given time. And I'll let you know that that's actually a much bigger problem than some people realize today. I was previously with a company called Bigfoot Networks that was acquired by Qualcomm about 10 months ago. We made all of the killer endpoint products that basically did different types of classification and prioritization on the endpoints for games and other multimedia type devices.
And I'm Dan MacDONALD from Euphoria Games. I'm part of the dev team there. We're currently working on a game called Offensive Combat, which is in its closed beta. It's a console quality FPS that runs in the browser. And we also have a mobile game that's a tie-in to that. So executing on those different experiences simultaneously and definitely experiencing the challenges of delivering a high-performance game in an environment where there's lag.
So my first question comes in a couple of different parts, and you may or may not be able to address a certain segment of it. But what do you see as the connected home? What is that? How does that be defined to you? How does cloud computing and data storage fit into that? And how does your cell phone, your iPhone, Android, whatever, fit in with the PS3 or the Xbox, the PC? And how does the PC and tablet fit into this? And do they even necessarily need to be connected?
Want me to start?
Yeah.
Well, a connected home by definition is internet connected, of course. Right now my toaster's not quite yet connected up to the internet yet, but it's working on it. I think a connected home, we have to think of beyond just devices within the home connected out to the internet, but think of the home sort of holistically as all the devices that are connected within the home together and working as a unit, even if they lost connectivity to the internet. I kind of like thinking about the future where the devices in the home are aware of the occupants and what they do and what their habits are, and they automatically start to figure out what to go do. That's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about now, but even those things will require a lot of connectivity and continuous connectivity of what's going on within the home, bandwidth-wise, connecting to each other. So that will put more stress on the internal infrastructure of the home, which is kind of what we're talking about today. Eventually, your home should be able to get connected up to your neighbors for emergency and alert purposes, and then your neighborhood, eventually your city, and then the state, and national networks in ways that that we really haven't thought too much about right now and trying to go do because of reliability and security reasons.
So the Borg.
So I'm sorry?
The Borg, essentially?
The Borg, yes, we'll all get Borged eventually. I think we'll want to do that. I think when we're all confident about some of the security issues getting resolved, there's going to be a lot of benefits to doing that.
Cool. So your question about what is a connected home, I think I would start by saying that connectedness isn't binary. It's not some homes are connected and others aren't. I think there's a spectrum of connectivity. So if we asked this question a couple years ago, the way that people would describe a connected home might look something similar to what we have today, but using that term I think implies that something's missing today and there's still room to grow and increase connectivity across devices. So asking about how phones and tablets and consoles work together, I think those are all just sort of nodes in a potentially connected home space, and each one of those devices allows designers and visionaries in the technology space to come up with scenarios that use all those devices together.
Yeah, focusing on the game side of it, I think, as you said, each of those devices has a different place in our lives and in the way we play games. And so I think a really interesting connected scenario would be that your console eventually becomes I would still like to see it be the hub of entertainment. I would like to stream all of my shows and all of my entertainment through that, but have that be the place where my main big 3D action adventure game is. But that might be playing up on the screen, and I'm sitting on my on my computer, maybe running a movie there, and I sit on the couch and I play with my iPad and I do some other game. I draw something or something. But when I'm away from the home, what I want to do is get out my phone and interact with my game that's back at home and have some other way to get to it. So it's not just the home being connected, it's being connected to these game worlds wherever you are, whatever portal you have, and be able to check in on my characters, have a unified game account. I can play on my iPad if I want to, or I can play on my console, and just having these different portals and different connections. And really I really think it's about being connected all the time, whether you're at home and whether you're out.
First off, let me say that we are definitely working on Rick's toaster problem. I read some research recently that said there's 6 IP-based devices in the average home in the United States. We think that's a great start, and then those devices are adding a lot of value. But the way we look at it is why is anything with power should basically be connected at some point. I mean, there is value to all this stuff being connected, and the cost and the infrastructure and the security all needs to get there pretty quick. But I think the vision is definitely always on, always connected with cell phone type, which cell phones have done a great job of this and tablets have done a great job of this. You turn on, you're connected instantly. The time people are willing to wait before they have this media or this connected experience, I think, is going down dramatically. So our goal, obviously, Qualcomm, is to figure out how to make those connections more relevant, faster, quicker. Another thing that's a big one to make it go further is configuration. When a new device comes into the home, they're already doing a better job of this, but it should instantly be able to add value and see other devices and know how to act with those other devices. Say the console is the center of that home, then once you bring something in, it should quickly recognize it and it should quickly be able to connect you to that thing. I'm in total agreement that the connected home no longer resides within the four walls of your house. You know, your media or your cloud or whatever you call it needs to be with you at all times. I don't think people any longer can go without access to their information for long periods of time at all. You know, I get twitchy, quite frankly, which is kind of embarrassing if you don't have like your phone in front of you for 24 hours straight. So it's one of those things where giving people instant access to what they need in a connected home is definitely where it's starting, but there's a lot of room to go to.
Yeah, just to add to that, as game developers, we're in the business of engaging players, engaging people in our entertainment experiences. And increasingly, those entertainment experiences are happening across a wider variety of devices. It used to just be your PC and the television, but now there's a wide array of mobile devices, from phones to tablets to the PC to the television. If we're not there on those other devices, we're missing out on an opportunity to engage our customers. We're missing out on opportunities to monetize. And increasingly, what I'm seeing is that it used to be you could really target one platform or the other because of the specific constraints and allowances of the hardware of that platform. But what we're seeing is, as mobile devices become more and more powerful and more connected, having better connection speeds, better graphical performance, the delta between the various platforms, be it a large screen television or a mobile phone, is getting smaller and smaller. So increasingly, there's a customer expectation. If I can do this on my TV, why can't I do it elsewhere? And as game developers, really being able to capitalize on that and be like, we are here, we are your entertainment experience, we want to engage you. We don't want to give you any opportunities to go engage with someone else's product. That's not good for our business. So how can we be there and make sure that we're giving you the small screen experience, the PC experience, or the living room experience?
With this current generation of smart TVs, apps, and stuff like that, will we be able to play games on our television, such as Angry Birds or whatever else, and then leave the house and fire up our smartphone and tablet, and then continue playing the game right where we left off when we were away from home? Would that be a good thing or a bad thing if we want to do that? Let's start with Ben.
Sure. So this is something PopCap's looked at in the past because we have games that end up on a lot of different platforms. And one other thing to keep in mind is development times can vary quite a bit, from building in Flash to Facebook to launching an iPhone game versus maybe an Xbox, where you have to build a fully compliant game and get it through Microsoft certification, for example. So that scenario, as described, sounds like a great thing, right? You're at home, you're playing your game, you want to get up and hit the road, and you can continue where you left off. But the other way of saying the same thing is that, say you've been playing on your iPhone, and PopCap's been hard at work and finally launches the Xbox version. Plants vs. Zombies, for example, a lot of people, they bought the game, they played a lot, they sort of finished it, and the same scenario here where you sort of sync state across devices means you buy it on the Xbox and all this magically works, and your state persists and shows up there, so you basically just bought a game you're already done with. So, and it's kind of the same scenario, and in one case it sounds great, and in the other case it seems not so great. So, not to say PopCap would never look into any of that kind of functionality, but I've anecdotally asked people over the years if they wanted that kind of stuff, and maybe surprisingly, a lot of people said that they'd prefer that not to exist. They want to, if they buy the game on the Xbox, they want it to start fresh and play through the whole game and experience it as it was designed on the platform, and any changes that were made to make it a better fit, they want to experience that stuff from the beginning. So I guess, I don't know. I think maybe that problem exists more in a premium model where you have to buy the game on each platform, and if it's freemium, people are okay downloading it and having a bunch of their state move over and maybe sort of having it, pre-finished in some sense. But I don't know. I think it's up to developers. The technology, I think, is going to be there pretty soon. So for the games and the companies that want to have their scenarios work that way, you can totally do that. But I'm not convinced that's the future for everybody, or at least the right future for everybody.
I wanted to respond to that because I think you made some really good points about that question really depends on the game and the design. And I think actually you might have identified it premium versus freemium, and it's really game type versus game type. So for a freemium game, where I've spent perhaps real money and a lot of time, maybe a month grinding to level 10 or 20 or whatever it is, what I would love to do is play my game on my laptop wherever I am, but then I go home and I'm on my iPad and I want to log in and play the same game, start where I start, if it's a game that works well on the iPad, not something that I have to shoehorn into that format, but if it works well. The other alternative that can be really compelling is that the iPad version is a different lens into the same account and same world. So if I have a game that either it's nested gameplay or it's just another portal, like if you had a dancing game and you play that on your laptop, I could come here and spend a bunch of time on my iPad customizing my avatar, practicing my dance moves, sending boosts back to my main game. But it's a different thing because I'm at home after work. I want to be on my couch. I don't want to have my laptop right there. I may not have access to my console at that time. But I completely agree with what you said. If I've played the content once, I don't want to play the content again. I don't want it to be done. It has to be an interesting, different way to play it or a different way to continue it.
So I come from an infrastructure background, so my thought is just a little bit different, is the fact that right now you cannot get this, in my opinion, you can't get the same game experience on a phone, to a tablet, to a PC, to a TV. But one of the big challenges infrastructure-wise, and this goes into development, is the fact that those are different experiences. So the lag and latency on a TV are much different than that on a computer, which are different than even wired and wireless on the same computer are different. So there needs to be, real thought in game development and on the infrastructure side in being able to build, and ecosystem's a bad word, but it's true in this case, of saying, hey, look, the connections, the speeds and feeds, the interaction, the latency, it can be similar across all those different platforms, but that's something that definitely needs to be considered as you develop games for, these multiple devices in your home. They all have different needs, wants, and deliver different experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I know personally when I use Netflix, I sometimes watch it on my laptop, I sometimes watch it on my desktop, sometimes use it on my Xbox. Netflix, in terms of that entertainment experience, is everywhere I want. I can watch it on my phone. And so I think there definitely is precedent, and there definitely is some consumer expectation that, as a consumer, I should be able to engage with my entertainment on a variety of different devices, on a variety of different platforms. And just specifically to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Euphoria Games, we have a browser-based FPS that's console quality, and our monetization method is time for money. So we allow people, if they're willing to invest their time and energy, they can experience the entire game. I think PopCap uses a similar, for the most part, for that type of thing. So we really want people to engage with the game. But if people are short on time, as many of us are, we'd like to give them the option of paying to achieve some of the same accomplishments. So it's what we're doing. You described a scenario where someone would play a game on one platform, and then it would be released on another platform, but their progress would already be persisted to that. And I agree with you. That's not a very good experience. What we're doing is we're releasing simultaneously on iOS and in the browser. And we're offering two different experiences. Like you say, the constraints and allowances of those platforms are different, but it's not a hardware difference per se. Graphically, we could probably deliver an FPS on a tablet or phone, but I'm not sure that we want to. That's not really a good interface paradigm. So what we're doing is we're delivering a different experience, something closer to maybe like a tower defense, maybe a Plants vs. No, I'm kidding. But what it does is it ties in. So if people want to spend their time to accomplish things in the game, in the main FPS game, they can do that on their device. They can do that on their phone, when they're on the bus, the places that people use their mobile phone. And they can get those, they can invest their time and see those rewards in the main game because it's connected on the back end. I think that's really the opportunity that we have in front of us with all of these connected devices, that we can start thinking about solutions like that. We can start offering people different experiences on different platforms.
So my answer is yes, definitely. I think, we have issues with the size of the screens that we have for devices we can carry in our pockets, but tablets, for example, are very powerful. So people are already making FPS-type games on tablets and we're figuring out how to make that happen. And that's something that we will continue to do because it's a very popular platform. Years ago, I'm going to date myself now, but I was on a panel at GDC Online and back when it was GDC Austin, or the Austin Game Conference. And some guys from Microsoft came up to me afterwards, and we were talking about this exact same subject. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of big companies that own a console and make a phone. So that was Microsoft was sort of in a unique position because even though they hadn't actually come out with their phone yet, we all knew they were working on it. But I held up my old Motorola V cell phone and said, this is what I want my Xbox to be so I can play on this when I'm out. And when I get home, I just plug it in and I can play on the big screen. So it just picks up. And now, that's a little harder problem with multiplayer games because of state issues and things like that, too. But it's a very doable thing for every other kind of game that we make, assuming it's the kind of game that makes sense to play on the two different platforms like that. We will figure out how to make wonderful games when we can do stuff like that are unique and different. And those are some of the kind of exciting options that we have. So I say, yes, we're going to do that for the people who like to go home and sit in front of their big screen TV and do other things other than watching television, of which we're all doing more now.
So with all of these different pieces to game on, is there still a place in the home for the traditional video game console? And how do you see the evolution of console hardware and gaming hardware affecting the connected home, games, entertainment, etc.? Shelby?
Well, I do see it having a place, but it definitely needs to evolve. It needs to take into account how much people are trying to stream everything. Like I said, I think it may be a hub where there already are apps for Netflix, and I can watch all of my entertainment through my Xbox. So I think that'll continue, and I think it really is about the ability to stay connected to that when you're away, whether it's through these other portals. It's also, I do a lot of kind of parallel and different types of play patterns at the same time in my house. So like my husband will be playing Mass Effect multiplayer on the console, so I don't have connection to it, but maybe I have a game on there I want to play. So being able to do something meaningful to my game on my iPad while I don't have access to the console is important, and I think that'll need to be taken into account.
Again, from a connectivity standpoint, the thing that worries me about a console is right now the console is basically fighting the other 27 different IP-based devices in your home right now for its connection to the outside world. So what I think needs to happen is from a home infrastructure standpoint, right now IPTV basically has this super highway into your home, completely cut off by the cable companies. The Xbox or the PlayStation or the Wii is basically completely in harm's way versus the rest of the connected devices in your home. It competes almost equally for that same traffic. So from an infrastructure standpoint, I do think there absolutely needs to be a smarter way. If that's going to be the hub of the home, which I agree with evolution, it definitely needs to continue to evolve, but it could definitely be there. I would also like to see refreshes of that device a little more frequently. But at the same point, these things that consume you as a consumer for media need to make sure that the connection is pristine and always on, always connected, and always the absolute best. So there needs to be a lot of internal plumbing done, I think, over time to guarantee that the devices that are most important to your connected experience are treated that way. And there's a lot in the works to do that, which is going to take the infrastructure companies and the game developers basically working together to make sure that the experience is always getting better and better over time.
So if you have some new routers that you want to send our way, we'll be happy to test them out for you.
Excellent.
We were talking earlier, and I thought it was really interesting, the things I don't know about how these multiple devices really compete, and it sounds like you're talking about that needs to be addressed. If you're going to have this console at the center of it and all these other devices, how are we going to get there and make that work?
Yeah, so just one thing that for everyone to know here. So say you have so we do Call of Duty, Call of Duty we play all the time at our office and our homes. So basically a latency in that game on average in our situation is about 60 milliseconds. 60 milliseconds is okay gaming for a first-person shooter. I know this is, and I think casual games will relate well to that same type scenario. Now what we actually do is we run a scenario where we put a YouTube in the same environment as that game that has 60 milliseconds worth of latency at that point. Latency just with the YouTube will jump up to about 100, 110. So you just added 40 to 50 milliseconds of latency by adding a YouTube. If you throw a BitTorrent into the mix, or you throw in iTunes, or God knows what your kid or your roommate or your spouse is doing at that time, you can actually take your latency from 60 milliseconds to over a second. So over a second, for any sort of interactive game whatsoever, it means you're toast. In fact, the server might actually kick you out at that point. So everything, there's multiple devices and many different applications running in your home. What we're working on is smarter equipment to basically recognize that, hey, it's a game. Games require minimal throughput in most cases, but are extremely latency sensitive. So how inside of your home infrastructure do you protect that? A YouTube, well, guess what? YouTubes are basically, in a lot of cases, treated as a file download. So they just take up as much of your pipe as possible for a short period of time, build your buffer, play all the way through. You have Netflix that does, adaptive bit rates and things like that based on your situation like that. And then you have torrents that open up a million different connections and try to get in there any way they possibly can. All those things are massively different. And today, quite frankly, your home network is organized in a way that can't possibly make all those things work well in harmony together. So, game developers do a lot of extremely clever things to try to, I would say, mask latency, deal with latency, and cut latency on the things that they can actually control. But you will see things that, right now there's devices out there, routers are actually the worst culprit of all this, but that start to prioritize different applications. Prioritization is definitely the first step in making that application, the experience better. But the real goal is basically traffic management. You want something that recognizes it's a game. It needs 100 kilobits, it's latency sensitive, boom, protect that. It's a YouTube 720, it needs 2.6 megabits a second, completely protect that. Oh, here comes a torrent. Torrents are absolutely important, but they're not time critical. So is there something you could do where you say, hey, look, all the rest of the available traffic, you give to that torrent? Well, if you can organize your home like that, you can do a lot more for each individual consumption mechanism that you're actually doing in the home. The other thing that we look at, quite frankly, is a different device. So if you're watching a video or playing a game on a 60-inch TV, you actually, in general, the resolutions and things are different than if you're watching it on a phone. So being application and device aware, you're going to see a lot more coming out there. But I'll absolutely tell you that's kind of the one thing it's the on-scene enemy of games and game developers is just the amount of traffic and the amount of devices building up in your home that you as game developers can't do anything about because you're not aware of it and the state is constantly changing. So just an additional problem that needs to be addressed as people are thinking about these games.
Traditionally, when we looked at, or looking at traditional consoles, I guess, the generations of these consoles were largely described by the graphical capabilities of those consoles. We've been on the same hardware generation for the last 7 years or so. I think 360 came out in 2005. And so increasingly, the hardware capabilities, having this high-performance device that you attach to your television is becoming less and less part of the business proposition of a console. Increasingly, what we're seeing on consoles is consoles are becoming these platforms for digital distribution. This is where you acquire your entertainment, be it games through a downloadable channel, be it videos. People are increasingly using their consoles to get access to their digital media and their entertainment. So as far as the traditional business of strapping on this really fast, really high-performant hardware to make your TV do cool stuff, we already have an incredibly high-risk industry that targets consoles and tries to push the limits of this hardware. I don't think dramatically increasing that hardware is actually going to add that much. It's just going to increase the production costs and the risks associated with that. You see things like Steam. You see things like Amazon's or all the various app stores that exist out there, iOS App Store. Increasingly, these platforms are becoming the more important thing, the distribution channels. So a console, really having a separate device that's separate from your television, I don't know that the business proposition is there. Recently, Kickstarter, there was a project on Kickstarter called the Oh Yeah, which was basically an Android-based console, very small console put together with existing hardware at a $99 price point. And I think they were asking for like $950K or something like that. The last time I checked, they were well over $5 million. So their business, or their customer proposition was, hey, you know all those great Android games that you enjoy already? You can download them and you can play them on your TV. And people are going bananas for it. And even in our closed beta, we have a fairly small group of players. We're getting questions all the time. Hey, will you guys be on the, oh yeah? Like, people want to have this connected experience. They want to play the games that they enjoy in one platform on another. So I see, and that's a $99 device. It doesn't seem to be too huge a gap or too huge a leap to imagine a TV manufacturer taking that same hardware and building it into a television and offering a very similar experience. Right now it's a standalone console because probably it's the easiest way for them to distribute it. But increasingly, I think these smart TVs are going to be capable of delivering the entertainment experiences that a lot of people are experiencing now through these various app portals and distribution channels.
Yeah, so there's one thing to add to that is, I mean, yeah, the console definitely needs to evolve in the fact that, like, one console per TV type thing, I mean, that's silly. Like, I mean, the console should be able to deliver to any one of your connected devices a similar experience. I mean, and I agree the hardware is a problem, but it can do more than it does today. And if it wants to stay relevant, I think it's going to absolutely have to, because it's not going to cut it in the years to come here.
So I do agree that I think the traditional video consoles are going to try to move in the direction of being your own massive Uber entertainment center. I do think that video consoles are here to stay as long as developers are willing to port the top games over to the individual video consoles. I think the costs of these are low enough, price point wise, to where if I had a particular game I wanted to play, it was only on one particular console, I would probably end up buying that because I just had to play that game. So we're still at that particular point. Whether or not the video game console will become that Uber Entertainment Center and actually replace, we have a Sony Blu-ray player now that made our stupid flat screen TV into a smart TV, basically, because it added in internet connectivity. We could get Hulu, things like that on it. Some of these are firmware upgradable, where we can actually just get new firmware, and all of a sudden new capabilities and features are added to it all the time. So is it really cost effective for a company like Microsoft or Sony to kind of keep up with that same technology on their own systems? Yeah, actually, it's probably quite inexpensive for them to do that and make the deals to go do that, and there's money to be made on their part for doing that kind of stuff too. So it's very possible that we'll see more things going in that direction. So I think it's hard for me to say how long it's going to be for the traditional game console actually becomes, less and less relevant in that particular space. But so we'll all share that adventure together, I think.
When I hear traditional video game console, to me that implies that it's a dedicated gaming device. And I think, at least by that definition, it's sort of already obsolete. If you look at the Xbox, there's video and TV and music and a lot of other stuff that the hardware now offers that is separate from gaming. And there's an interesting article on Penny Arcade recently that expressed some complaints from developers that the Xbox Live Arcade section, where people spend a lot of time building games and putting them up on the digital downloadable platform for Xbox, through Microsoft's iteration on the dashboard, that section has gotten kind of buried now, and it's almost hard for people to turn on their Xbox and find where to go to get new games because of all this new functionality that Microsoft is offering through the platform. So in that sense, I think consoles have already changed a lot, and moving forward, I wouldn't expect that to slow down.
Do we have any numbers for broadband penetration? We sort of assume that everybody has broadband now, but there are still people who either don't have internet or, God forbid, still on dial-up. How has it become where broadband is the standard, and which we sort of assume with game development and multiplayer is, we assume that everybody has broadband. Where does bandwidth go next? Michael?
So, yeah, dealing with people without broadband is an issue, but I'll tell you that, so we do a lot of business in India, in China. I mean, cellular's just taken, it is the new broadband, basically, for places that can't do broadband. Broadband is nice in the United States, but the infrastructure is there to support it. It's clearly not there in 2/3 of the world. So you're going to see LTE especially, and even, I mean, in India, 2G, 3G, that type of stuff. And from a number of people connected via a broadband mechanism, I think cellular will continue to outstrip, I mean, broadband's basically not being deployed anymore in a lot of places. The United States, again, already has infrastructure, and then you got people trying to drive fiber to the home and things like that. But what we see just from, again, from an infrastructure standpoint is cellular. I don't know if everyone knows what femtocells is, but local basically cellular connections that you can connect your phone to, but they're basically connected real quick to broadband type infrastructure. We see a lot more of that being deployed because at some point the air is, I mean, quite frankly, the air is saturated. I mean, there is a limit to how much data you can pump through the air. So what you're starting to see in the United States and other things is local deployments of Wi-Fi type networks that basically are used for cellular backhaul and Wi-Fi backhaul that says, hey, look, there's these particular devices in public areas or even in neighborhoods that will take your signal from your phone or your PC to that device, but you per se in your home do not have to have a cable or fiber delivered to every single different home in that neighborhood. So from a broadband perspective, I 100% think the world will continue to quickly get there, but I think the ways they are getting there will change dramatically, already have changed dramatically, and will continue to go down that route.
Mike, what do you define broadband as specifically?
So for us, we basically define broadband as a certain connection. More than anything, the ability to transfer data at a certain rate. I actually don't know what the number is, but in most places, over a megabit, quite frankly, is broadband to me. And with LTE, you're gonna start to see some real improvements on that.
Of course, traditional broadband would be lower latency because you're directly connected up through some non-cellular network. So a bigger issue for a lot of us that are dealing with high latency issues in games and is that cellular networks tend to add a lot of latency into the equation. It's getting better, but it's still pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's hard on this is the number. So we talk about in your home, you have all these different things connected, all competing for traffic. Well, on a cellular network, you can go from 1 connection to 200 connections in the matter of seconds in a lot of cases. So writing applications that can deal with that is not trivial by any means.
So with all of these other issues and devices that will affect your latency, your lag, your connection, what are some of the other causes that developers should be aware of, and what is being done now and in the future to address these sorts of things? As a developer, Darren?
Oh, sure. Some of the challenges we're running into, we've seen really good ping times to our servers. So, anywhere between 15 and 60 milliseconds. And you see that and you're like, wow, this guy's got a really good connection. He shouldn't be experiencing any lag. And then you hear a report back from those players and they're like, yeah, stuff's hitching. It's a little bit stuttery. And we tell them, yes, it's closed beta. We're diagnosing these issues. But there's a lot of other issues that come into play, specifically with us because we are a real-time game, multiplayer, networked. There's a very low tolerance for latency. And there's other issues such as how many packets actually get through. There's a quality of connection that goes beyond just the individual speed of the connection. The number of packets that you send versus the number that are received and the order in which they're received. So it goes beyond just having a good round trip time to that user, specifically for high performance applications like a first person shooter.
Yeah, I've been lucky in my career to work on MMOs, first-person shooters, and real-time strategy, and mobile. And in fact, I just got through designing an entire platform designed for mobile, which had to go deal with not just latency issues, but the incredible number of connects and disconnects that can happen, which means that we had to have a security infrastructure in there that could securely reconnect you so you're not having to constantly log back in. I mean, have all that stuff happening in the back end. We were quite amazed with mobile networks and how well that they did when everything was going smoothly. But we're also quite amazed how quickly they could go non-smoothly when you started doing a lot of testing, and then things would suddenly start dropping, and very, very bad things would actually happen. In designing MMOs, and I've been lucky enough to be able to work on these since 1995, we actually started designing games for lag tolerance. And so MMOs have in the game design, in a traditional MMO, it's built into the game design to where the way you do things, the way you interact with things, allows the game to be much more lag tolerant. Whereas when we're working on a first-person shooter, oh, and by the way, real-time strategy games can do a lot of the same kind of tricks that MMOs do to hide all that because of the nature of the way we design real-time strategy games. First-person shooters are a whole nother ballgame. And when we did the Matrix Online, I had to write an MMO that actually played like a first-person shooter. So we had to go deal with very complex lag issues and trying to go deal with prediction and everything, playing every trick in the book that was known at the time. And fortunately, we knew a lot by then to actually make the game play well. So teaching new developers to come in and use things like UDP instead of TCP, so you're not dealing with slow start. Pretty much one of the things that interests me about this panel was the home, as we get much better ISPs now and a lot more better connectivity, and especially as we start dealing with the cloud, which I'd be happy to answer the cloud question because I'm a little bit more cynical, I think, than most about what the cloud can actually do for you, clouds per se. But as we got well, I lost my train of thought, but as we got more and more connectivity and more and better bandwidth, we found that the problems then went off into other areas. So the ISPs originally were the big problems for us, and now we're looking at other things like people that have too much saturation in their home or their business, and people are playing at business. When you use things like TCP and you have even short interruption problems, they can interrupt the entire flow. So I've been preaching for many years for developers to use things like UDP. It's a little harder problem for them to develop with. That's why games like Unreal, for example, still use UDP by default underneath, so you're not retransmitting old data and things like that to try to help games like first-person shooters actually play better and deal better with problems of packet loss. And packet loss is what causes a lot of the problems that you see when you have a lot of lag in games.
Also, some people will perceive lag as load times. When you, increasingly as the cloud becomes more and more prevalent and we're delivering our games to more and more devices, it becomes increasingly beneficial to actually stream these games down to these devices. And a lot of times, I've seen developers make the mistake where they just upload their game assets to a single server, and they say, hey, we've got good ping, should be fine. And then they get users logging in, I disconnected, or it's taking forever to load the game. A lot of times the problem isn't necessarily their network connection, but actually it's on the server side that's serving those assets out to the game. And so we've had really good success leveraging things. We work with a partner called Highwinds, which is a content delivery network. And what they do is they take our asset server, which we just uploaded to a single server, and they replicate all of those assets at all of these points, geographical locations that are very close to where our users are and have very high bandwidth. And we saw a dramatic increase in the overall user experience. People were able to get in, download the assets, get into the game in under a minute, versus before when we were just using it was a nice server on a big pipe, but you get a number of concurrent users on that thing and it just slows to a crawl. And so that's been a big win for us in terms of addressing what players perceive as lag, but isn't necessarily lag.
Very true. A poorly made server will cause those kind of problems. A poorly designed server will cause those problems. I happen to think that, we all hear about the cloud and how's it going to save everything. A cloud, the benefits that we get from the cloud will come from the developers who are developing games to work on the cloud. They will, in theory, they should be designing games that are more elastic, they're more scalable. They would then be able to provide a better reliability, because if there are problems, it's very quickly allocate other machines to start to take over the problem. But if you're locked into one game server and that server goes down or starts having problems, and it's not designed to be able to move you off of that server onto another server that has less problems and scales out the whole problem, then the cloud's not going to help at all, as long as you have really good connectivity from your home to whatever server that you're talking to. But like a CDN, clouds can also go move the problem closer to you. So it would be possible, although we're not really doing a lot of this in games right now, but actually designing outside of the web to actually create games that move the game server itself closer to the people that were playing, assuming those people were playing in closer proximity. And because of time zones, that actually happens more frequently than you think.
And I want to approach this from a whole different direction just for a minute. There's a whole bunch of games where, as Mike was mentioning, multiplayer tends to be low bandwidth, but latency is very important. But I mean, look at a lot of the games that are popular today, Angry Birds and Plants vs. Zombies, and a lot of stuff on Facebook, from the Farmville type stuff to Bejeweled Blitz. There's a lot of games that have found success where they've basically solved this problem by not even having to deal with it. I mean, if you don't have synchronous multiplayer where every fraction of a second's relevant for gameplay, which either means you can have a different form of synchronous multiplayer or asynchronous multiplayer and take turns, and you submit your turn when you're done, and you can wait as long as you want, and the game is still fun. You can find success there too. Or looking at the value added by services like Game Center or Xbox Live, where they offer achievements and leaderboards. Those are still connected features that contribute value to games and provide interesting experiences between users and players. But all of those things, I think, basically bypass this problem of slow routers and situations where latency is getting in the way of the experience you're trying to have.
You make a really good point. I think it's all about designing a game that recognizing the challenges that you have on that platform in that situation. So Pipeworks has transitioned from the console world where everything we had was on a disk, and it was really about laying out the files in the right order so you could reduce your seek times. So in this world, the challenges are disconnections, like you said, it's download times, it's connection speed, how do we fit streaming into that, how do we fit bundles into that, what do you have locally, and the answers to those questions are different depending on the platform. So if we're looking at a browser game, we believe initial download, because you don't know, some people are broadband, like you said. Here in the office, we play the game, we have a certain speed, I go home and my game is slower. So we started off on Dancing with the Stars, we had pretty large initial downloads, and we ended up re-architecting that to get it down to a 4 meg initial download. And then it's really all about UI design and game design from there. So there's all these common tricks. You want to get the player into an interesting spot in the game where they're going to spend a little time, and you can do your your background downloading of the rest of the assets of the game. And these are things that all kinds of games are doing. So in Dancing with the Stars, we do 4 megs initial download, get you into the avatar creator. We start streaming individual bundles of assets that might have 20 to 40 assets, serving them on demand. And in the background, we're downloading the stages and the rest of the game. But we've kind of slowed the user up a little bit where they could get ahead of the flow because we can't fully control it, but we believe and we predict that they're going to spend a little time there, give us the time to download that. There's also some other important things we do because of the disconnection issues. We recognize, okay, if somebody disconnects, they're not going to want to re-download 60 megs of stuff and wait another couple minutes. We try to do things in atomic transactions. So one thing that we have in Dancing with the Stars I think is pretty interesting is that for the most part it's kind of like the Vil games where it's asynchronous and it's a click based. I click something, a timer happens, that covers some response time. But we do have a piece of gameplay that is very in the moment clicking gameplay for about 60 seconds tops. And what we do there is recognize that if the player loses connection halfway through, they're not going to want to have lost what we charge them in energy without getting the benefits at the end. So you recognize that you actually have to queue up these actions, complete the whole thing, and then charge it and award it at the same time at the end so that they can play their quick gameplay. We aren't trying to have quick server response in the middle of gameplay. And
just to be clear, I'm not recommending that everybody goes out and builds more Vil games. I just mean you can design around network problems.
Exactly, and it's recognizing what your game needs. And so you can simulate, there are tricks and ways to simulate that quick response time while recognizing it doesn't all actually have to be like server back and forth that fast.
I'll say there is a class of games that is very difficult to go design around, having done this now for 17 years. So a very fast action like first-person shooter multiplayer games are very difficult to design and make the game work like you would expect and if you're dealing with a tremendous amount of network packet loss or lag. So there are a class of those kind of games, but I totally agree that for most other games, be aware of what you're trying to do and design the right kind of game for it.
we're running short on time. I wanted to ask one more question. Is there something that your company is doing to address this issue? And on the flip side of that, what is there from other market segments that you would like to see done to address this issue of lag, latency, connecting devices?
So we've really bit off a big challenge in delivering a real-time networked action-based game, FPS game in the browser. But the good news is that it appears to be doable. Even based on today's technology, we have players who are out there playing, they're having a great experience. They're getting in, they're getting through account creation, they're getting into a game and playing with people in under a minute, and even faster on subsequent loads thanks to caching. And it's working. There's a lot of issues with networking. We spend, especially when you're talking about, even if you're delivering on the PC platform, you've got PCs, you've got Macs, you've got a wide variety of system specs. You have to have a lot of fallback capabilities, both on the graphics side and a lot of network tolerance on the as much as you can build in on the networking side. But it's happening. I think that's really the potential and the business opportunity of the connected home, and having all these devices connected, is that we can provide very immediate entertainment experiences. Increasingly, consumers have a very low tolerance for friction when they're consuming their entertainment, in terms of a very large download or a high upfront price point. And there's a lot of existing industries that have done well doing that, and they're working very hard in defending that space. But there's this whole new space that's emerging where you can create these very quick, easy to pick up, easy to get into, easy to have fun experiences, and that's where we're at. I would love to see people get better network infrastructure in their homes. I would love to see netbooks have a little bit bigger GPUs in them. That'd be really nice. But even with all those challenges, we're still able to reach a lot of consumers out there who are very excited to have this type of product.
So,
Go ahead.
So one thing to note just on this question and last question is, so we've done a lot of analysis on latency in general. So what we've basically found in most situations, the home accounts for 40% of latency, the ISP itself accounts for 20% of latency, and the game server accounts for an average 40% of latency also. And the two biggest variables on those sides are actually the server. First of all, 4 o'clock, like you can launch like a YouTube or something like that. At 4 o'clock when the kids come home, that server, even if you have a CDN type network, still has issues. So there's variability there. The most variability that we've seen actually resides in the home. And I know from a game developer, if you're smart, you want to develop a game that's great for as many different people as possible. But I'll tell you that the things to look for coming up are especially smart networking. Things that basically can look inside of your home, detect the devices and the applications are running, and can basically organize your network in a way that all of those things are delivered in an appropriate manner. My thought for you guys is it's almost a suggestion to customers that, hey, look, if you're not having a great experience, you might want to think about this type of stuff. But the way to make money is to sell it to as many people as you possibly can. I think that the problem right now is bad, quite frankly, and it will get progressively worse. So right now, I think there's a lot of smart things that people in this room can do to deal with it. But given 5 years and 2 to 3x the number of connected devices in your home, I think the problem's going to get worse and worse. So I think infrastructure and the game developers are going to have to work closely together to make sure that this problem becomes scalable in a smart way for everyone.
I agree with Mike on all points. I just wanted to add that he did bring up earlier that broadband is really worldwide, because we deal with shipping games worldwide, is increasingly becoming more wireless, going to be more wirelessly available. And so we're going to be relying a lot on the carriers to actually do a really, really solid job with trying to minimize latency and packet loss through those networks.
And that's it. We are out of time. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.